My name is James Wilson, and last Christmas I roasted a full turkey, set the table for five, and waited by the window like a fool. My son promised we'd spend the holiday together, him, his wife, my two grandkids, and me. But instead of arriving with laughter and love, he showed up at my door with a lie. "Sarah's mom is sick," he said. "We have to leave now." I believed him. I even handed him $10,000 to help with her supposed treatment. That night I opened Facebook and saw them in Hawaii, drinking cocktails under palm trees. My son, his wife, the kids, and her mother, healthy as ever. They used my money, my trust, and they left me alone with a cold turkey and colder silence. Before I tell you how I made them regret it, I want to ask, where are you watching from and how old are you? Don't forget to subscribe to Family Betrayal Unmasked for more. The house smelled like pine needles and gingerbread, just the way Mary used to make it feel every December. I'd spent the whole morning making her cranberry stuffing recipe and basting the turkey like she taught me, humming along with the old radio as Silent Night played through the kitchen. The tree stood proud in the corner, its lights blinking gently, casting gold across the handmade ornaments. One of them, a lopsided star made of paper and glitter, caught my eye. Christopher made it when he was 6. I ran my thumb across the edge, then placed it gently back. The dining table was set for 5: me, Christopher, Sarah, little Emily, and Max. 5 sets of plates, 5 linen napkins folded, just so, 5 little name cards written in my best penmanship. It felt good to prepare like this. It made the house feel full, even if it had been empty for too long. I'd imagined this day all month. My first Christmas since Mary passed. I wanted the laughter of my grandchildren to drown out the echo of her absence. I even polished the old silverware. Emily liked the fancy forks, said it made her feel like a princess. I smiled, just thinking of her giggle. The doorbell rang. I wiped my hands on a dish towel, checked my sweater for spots, and opened the door. Christopher stood there, bundled in a new coat I hadn't seen before, the kind that looked expensive, with a scarf tucked just right and boots too clean for snow. "Hey, Dad," he said, eyes darting. No smile, no hug, no sound of car doors or children's footsteps behind him. "We need to talk." My chest dropped, but I held the door open. "Come in. Dinner's almost ready. Where's Sarah and the kids?" He stepped in, shaking snow from his collar. "They're not coming. I'm not staying either." I stared, not understanding. "It's Christmas in 4 days. He looked uncomfortable, twisting his keys in his hands. "Sarah's mom is sick, real sick. We have to fly out tonight. Doctor says she doesn't have much time." "I'm sorry." My throat tightened. I didn't want to argue, not now. "Of course. Family comes first," I managed to say, though something in his voice didn't feel right. "You could stay for dinner at least." "We can't. Bags are packed. Flight's early." I looked toward the tree, then back at him. "Let me grab the gifts for the kids." "No, don't," he said quickly. "Just keep them here. We'll get them when we're back." I reached for the red-wrapped box anyway. I had spent hours finding the perfect train set for Max and a baby doll Emily had wanted since summer. As I held them, Christopher sighed. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." I froze. "All right. Just tell them I love them." He nodded, but didn't really look at me. "Thanks for understanding." A gust of cold air rushed in as he opened the door. I followed him to the porch, watching his car pull away into the snow. He didn't even call Emily to say goodnight. I stood there for a long time, holding those gifts like they could warm my hands. But they didn't. I sat at the edge of the table long after Christopher's taillights disappeared into the snow. The turkey was done golden and steaming, a small sprig of rosemary poking from the side. I'd carved the first slice just like Mary used to before realizing no one would be there to eat it. I let the knife rest beside the plate and poured myself a cup of black coffee instead. The radio kept playing its cheerfulness, rubbing like sandpaper against my silence. Every once in a while, I'd glance at the tree, at the unopened gifts still sitting beneath it, and I'd wonder what kind of person lies like that with a straight face looking his own father in the eye. I replayed Christopher's words. She doesn't have much time. He said it like a man reading off a script, too clean, too smooth. His eyes never held mine for more than a second, but I dismissed it. I didn't want to think badly of my own son. He had a family to care for, obligations, pressure I'd never understand. At least that's what I told myself again and again, until I could almost believe it. I tried calling Sarah's number later that evening, straight to voicemail. I didn't leave a message. What could I say that her absence had hollowed out the room, that her laughter used to fill our home like a bell, the kind of daughter-in-law any man would be proud to have? Or so I thought. I carried the turkey to the counter, letting it sit untouched. I wrapped the cranberry, stuffing the mashed potatoes, the green beans, all into neat little glass containers. The kind Mary liked. I stacked them in the fridge like they were leftovers from a party that never happened. It was only when I passed the mirror in the hallway that I caught a glimpse of myself, sweater neat, hair combed, eyes lost. I looked like a man who had prepared to celebrate and ended up grieving instead. I sat back down on the couch, phone in hand, considering a text to Christopher. Just a few words, maybe a reminder to call when they landed, or to tell Emily and Max that Grandpa missed them. But I didn't press send. Something in me had shifted. Not enough to act. Not yet. Just enough to ache. I looked across the room at Mary's photo above the fireplace. Her smile always steady, even now, years after she was gone. I whispered, "You'd know what to do, wouldn't you?" She always had a way of seeing through people, of catching the lies before they were spoken. Me, I always gave the benefit of the doubt. That night I didn't sleep much. I kept waking to the sound of snow against the window, thinking maybe it was a knock at the door. But it never was, just the wind. Just the quiet of a house meant for 5 holding space for only 1. Morning came like a weight on my chest. I walked into the kitchen and poured coffee I never intended to finish. The living room still held the warmth of yesterday's fire, now long cold in the hearth. The tree lights blinked dutifully, like they didn't realize the holiday had been canceled. I sat down on the floor beside the tree legs, stiff fingers brushing over the red gift box that still sat untouched beneath the branches. It was Max's gift, the train set. The one I'd spent 2 hours choosing. Battery-operated real steam puffs, even a miniature conductor in the front car. I imagined his small hands tearing the paper off, the way his eyes would light up. He loved trains more than anything always did. The box had a dent in the corner where I'd dropped it the night before. I hadn't even noticed at the time. I smoothed the paper down carefully, as if that could erase what had happened. Beside it, a smaller box, wrapped in blue with silver ribbon. Emily's doll. I'd asked the clerk if it was the one that cried, drank milk, and blinked its eyes. She said yes, and even threw in a tiny blanket. I added a little card that said, "To my princess. Love, Grandpa." It was still taped on top, my handwriting wobbling just slightly. I hadn't written that much by hand since Mary passed. I used to write her little notes every morning before I went out to work. "Save me a cup of that strong coffee, or you still owe me a dance tonight." She kept some of those notes in her recipe box. Now they sit in a drawer I rarely open. I picked up the doll box and held it in my lap, the ribbon brushing against my palm. The silence in the room was sharp-cutting. I imagined Emily and Max waking up in a hotel room near the airport, asking why they couldn't be with Grandpa this year. Or worse, not asking at all. Maybe they were already on the plane, laughing, drinking juice from plastic cups, not thinking about the man who'd set the table and waited. I thought about calling again, just to hear their voices, but it felt hollow now, like chasing smoke. Instead, I did something I hadn't done in years. I walked over to the record player, pulled out Mary's favorite album, Nat King Cole, and let the static hum for a few seconds before the music crept in. Chestnuts roasting on an open fire. His voice floated through the room like memory. I sat on the couch, holding the red box tight against my chest, like it might give something back. Comfort, clarity, forgiveness. But it didn't. Just cardboard and wrapping paper and the ghost of good intentions. The lights on the tree flickered against the reflection in the window, and in the glass I didn't see a father. I saw a man holding onto a gift that would never be opened, waiting for a family that had already chosen somewhere else to be. It was after dark when I finally picked up my phone again. I hadn't planned to check anything, didn't care about the world outside this house anymore. But something in me, a dull ache mixed with restless curiosity, made me open Facebook. I told myself it was just to scroll through the usual, see the neighbors' decorations, maybe some holiday photos from old friends. But then I saw her name, Sarah, my daughter-in-law, a new post, bold text right at the top of my feed. Best vacation with the best family. I didn't breathe as I tapped it. The photo took a second to load. Then the screen filled with bright blue ocean, golden sand, and palm trees swaying like nothing in the world could touch them. There they were. Christopher's shirt, half unbuttoned, sunglasses on, grinning like a man who didn't know how to spell regret. Sarah laughing, her arm around her mother, who looked healthy, glowing, tanned. Max and Emily stood in front of them, little bathing suits and wide smiles, and a cocktail in Sarah's hand, its umbrella casting a shadow over her face. I zoomed in, unwilling to believe it. Sarah's mom wore a lei holding a smoothie, not a hospital wristband. No oxygen tube, no visible illness. Just a woman on a beach enjoying her life. I stared at that photo for what felt like an hour. It burned into me, seared across everything I'd held on to. My fingers tightened around the phone until it creaked. I stood up, heart racing, walking circles through the living room, then sat down again. I couldn't stop looking. There were more pictures. A sunset dinner, Max burying Sarah in sand, Christopher holding Emily on his shoulders with a ukulele in hand. It wasn't a quiet emergency. It was a celebration, paid for with the money I sent. $10,000. For treatment, for urgent care, for a life-and-death situation. I backed out of the post, scrolled further. Another caption. Nothing like a Christmas in paradise. It was posted an hour ago. I looked around my house, cold leftovers in the fridge, a dark fireplace, a tree blinking for no one. My family wasn't just gone. They were celebrating my absence, laughing with the woman who was supposedly on her deathbed. I picked up the bank receipt from the counter, the one I'd been too tired to file away. $10,000. Transferred to Christopher Wilson. I remembered the way he looked at me that day, nervous, rushing, hugging me like he was already somewhere else. I thought it was stress. It was guilt. That realization broke something open. I called him, handshaking. He answered on the second ring. "Dad, it's late. Where are you?" My voice didn't sound like mine. With Sarah's mom, "Why don't lie to me?" The silence on the other end was thick. I saw the photo, Christopher. "You're in Hawaii." He sighed, annoyed. "You're spying on us now. You told me she was dying. You're being dramatic." That's when I knew. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was betrayal. After the call ended, I sat there for a long time, the phone still in my hand, the screen glowing with that cursed photo like it wanted to mock me. His words echoed in my ears. "You're being dramatic." As if I had imagined it all. As if this pain were a choice. I looked down at the bank receipt again, the number printed in black ink, $10,000 more permanent than any apology he could ever muster. That wasn't just money. That was my cushion, my safety net, the careful saving from years of saying no to myself. It was the new roof I'd been putting off, the hearing aids I kept telling the doctor I didn't need yet. It was sacrifice. But more than that, it was trust. And they turned it into beachfront cocktails. I walked into the kitchen, each step heavy, and dropped the receipt onto the table. I stared at it like it might confess something new, like maybe it would explain how my own son could lie so easily. The kitchen felt colder now, the Christmas decorations around me suddenly cheap and hollow. I unplugged the tree lights. Their cheer didn't belong here anymore. I opened the drawer beside the sink and pulled out Mary's old tin box. It was where she kept birthday cards, church bulletins, receipts, little scraps of our life. I reached past those and pulled out one of Christopher's old letters he'd written it in college. "I'll always be there for you, Dad." I read the line 3 times. Then I laughed. A short, humorless sound. I stood staring at the window, my reflection looking back at me, older, worn, and a little bit smaller than I remembered. "You gave him everything," I muttered. "And he gave you lies." But it wasn't just the money. It was the way he looked me in the eyes when he told the story. The urgency, the desperation, the rehearsed sorrow. He had played me, and I let him. That's what stung most. Not the money, not the loneliness, but how willingly I walked into it. Believing my son still saw me as his father, not just a source of funding. I sat down at the table, the cold from the floor crawling up through my socks. I ran my fingers over the edge of the receipt. I had wanted Christmas to be full of warmth, of laughter, of children tearing wrapping paper, while Sarah poured cider and Christopher carved the turkey like I used to. Instead, I got silence. Lies. Photos on a beach. I didn't cry. I didn't throw anything. But something inside me settled like frost on glass. I looked around the room one last time. Then I folded the receipt, slid it into my wallet like a bookmark, and whispered, "Never again." The gifts stayed under the tree, but I no longer looked at them the same way. They were no longer wrapped promises. They were warnings. Reminders that love, no matter how deep, must come with boundaries. And sometimes the only gift you need to give yourself is the courage to stop being fooled. The knock at the door startled me. It was sharp, deliberate, not the wind or a package drop-off. I opened it slowly, expecting maybe a neighbor's delivery gone astray, but instead, there she stood, Ellen Thompson, my next-door neighbor of 15 years, holding a plate wrapped in cellophane. Her scarf was dusted with snow, her cheeks red from the cold, and her eyes sharp like she'd seen something in mine before I even spoke. "James," she said, stepping in without waiting, "you look like hell." She placed the cookies on the counter and shrugged off her coat like she owned the place. "I figured you'd be alone." I saw Christopher's car wasn't here. I didn't answer right away. My mouth opened, then closed again. I hadn't realized how raw my voice had become until I tried to use it. She glanced around the kitchen, the dim lights, the untouched food, the silence. She saw everything. So she said, pulling out a chair at the table, "Spill it." I stood there a moment longer before I sat across from her. The cookies smelled like cinnamon and nutmeg, warm and out of place in the cold room. "He lied to me," I said, voice low. "Told me Sarah's mother was dying. Said they had to fly out for Christmas to take care of her. I gave him $10,000 for her treatment." I paused. Then I saw the photos. Hawaii. Beaches. Cocktails. Her mother looked healthier than I do. Ellen didn't flinch. She just stared at me, jaw tight, fingers laced on the table. He took your money and left you alone on Christmas. I nodded. Didn't even let the kids call. I found out through Facebook. She leaned back, exhaling. They played you. I didn't argue. She wasn't wrong. I feel like a damn fool, I muttered. No, you feel betrayed. That's different. Her voice softened slightly. You trusted your son. That's not a crime. I looked at her, the weight of her words settling. She reached forward, brushing a finger over the edge of the receipt still lying beside the coffee mug. You have proof? Yeah. Transfer receipt. From 3 weeks ago. Then we start there. I blinked. Start. She smiled, but it was the kind of smile that held teeth. You're not the only one who's been taken advantage of by family. My nephew cleaned me out years ago. Claimed he needed capital for a startup. Bought himself a new truck and a boat instead. I raised an eyebrow. What did you do? Her grin widened. I was a lawyer, James. I froze his accounts and sued him for fraud. Got my money back, ruined his ability to get credit for years. He calls me the Hammer now. I couldn't help it, I chuckled. First time in days. You're serious. Dead serious, she said. You've got a joint account with your son. Yes. It was easier when he helped with Mary's funeral stuff. Then we freeze it. Tomorrow. She said it like we were baking a pie. Calm, assured, ruthless. I stared at her, the woman I'd waved to over fences, made small talk with about property taxes and weeds. And suddenly, she looked like the only ally I had in this entire world. I never imagined I'd be sitting in my kitchen at 72 years old plotting financial warfare with a retired lawyer over a plate of cookies. But there I was, elbows on the table, receipt beside me, and Ellen Thompson sketching a plan like she was drawing up a battle map. Here's what you need, she said, her voice calm but edged with steel. A lawyer, real one, who can act fast. Someone who can file a motion to freeze the account before Christopher drains the rest of it. You said it's joint. I nodded. I opened it years ago so he could help manage bills when Mary got sick. Just never closed it. She raised an eyebrow. You still have access? Yes. I check it every few weeks, but I haven't looked since the transfer. Then we'll start with a snapshot of the current balance. If there's anything left, we're freezing it by tomorrow. She stood, walked over to her purse, and pulled out a small leather notebook and a pen. You ever heard of Tom Clark? Name sounds familiar. He's sharp, quiet, not flashy, but he'll go to the mat for clients like you. He helped me ruin my nephew's credit score so bad he still uses prepaid debit cards. I blinked. You enjoy this a little too much. She smirked. Justice has a flavor, James. You'll recognize it soon. I grabbed my laptop from the study and powered it on, hands trembling a bit. Not from fear, but from a strange cocktail of nerves and awakening. I hadn't felt this much agency in months, maybe years. We pulled up the online banking portal. The balance stared back 4-2. He hadn't taken it all yet. We're not too late, Ellen muttered. She jotted the figure down. First thing in the morning, we'll call Tom. I'll come with you if you want. Or I can make the intro and let you talk man to man. I'd appreciate the company. I closed the laptop slowly. Ellen, I didn't expect this. I thought I'd be sitting here alone until spring. She looked at me, her expression softening just slightly. You're not alone, not unless you choose to be. And you're certainly not powerless. I swallowed hard. I feel like a fool. No, she said again more firmly. You feel wounded. That's different. And wounded doesn't mean weak. It means you have something to fight for. I looked around the room, the dim lights, the quiet. the Christmas tree blinking in the corner like it still believed someone might come back. "I just want them to understand what they did," I said. "I want it to sting. Not because I'm petty, but because I need them to stop seeing me as disposable." Ellen placed a hand over mine. It was warm, steady. "Then let's make it sting. Quietly, legally, permanently." For the first time in weeks, I felt a shift, like the ground had settled beneath my feet again. Not because the pain was gone, but because I decided to stop letting it own me. The next morning, the air was sharp with frost, the kind that made your lungs bite back when you stepped outside. I wore my oldest wool coat, the one Mary used to call my thinking jacket, and met Ellen in her driveway just after 9. She handed me a thermos of black coffee and slid into the passenger seat of my pickup, like she'd done it 100 times before. "You nervous?" she asked. "I'm something," I said. "Not quite fear, not quite fire, somewhere in between." "That's the right place to be," she replied. "Means you're awake." Tom Clark's office was tucked between a bakery and a bookstore in downtown Concord. It had a modest glass door with a brass handle and a placard that read, "Clark and Associates," in plain serif font. No fancy branding, no marble floors. Just the kind of place that did real work for real people. A young receptionist with square glasses looked up as we walked in. "Mr. Wilson." "That's me. Mr. Clark will see you now." She motioned toward the corner office where a man in his 50s stood and extended his hand. He wore a navy suit that had seen years of service and shoes, with just enough polish to say he still cared. "Ellen tells me you've got a problem," he said as we shook hands. "Let's get to it." I took a seat across from his desk, the window behind him, letting in pale winter light. Ellen stayed in the corner, arms crossed, quiet but watchful. I laid out everything: the lie, the 10 grand, the joint account, the photos from Hawaii, the voicemail. I didn't dramatize it. I didn't have to. Truth didn't need costume. Clark took notes with a black pen on a legal pad, each stroke deliberate. When I finished, he tapped the end of the pen on the page. "You want to freeze the account?" "Yes." "You still have access. I checked it last night. A little over 4 grand left." "Then we file today," he said. "You'll sign a motion requesting temporary hold on the joint account. Given the claim of financial misrepresentation and familial manipulation, we can push this through fast. And after that, depends. You want the money back?" I nodded. "Then we build a fraud case. The receipt helps. So do the texts, the photos. You've got evidence of intent and misdirection." He slid a stack of documents toward me. "Start here. Sign where I mark." My hand trembled slightly as I picked up the pen. Each signature felt like a slow exhale of years of being too soft, too forgiving. When I finished, he stood. "This is step 1, James. It won't undo what they did, but it will shift the balance. He'll know he's not dealing with a pushover anymore." I nodded, the corners of my mouth tightening into something not quite a smile. "Good," I said. "It's time he did." Ellen looked over at me as we stepped back into the cold. "How do you feel?" I zipped up my coat and stared out across the snowy street. Like I finally showed up for myself. Back home, the paperwork from Clark's office sat on the kitchen table, stacked neatly beside my coffee mug and the wrinkled bank receipt that had started all of this. The tree still blinked quietly in the corner, its lights soft and steady like they hadn't noticed the shift in the air. But I had. I wasn't the same man who stood here days ago holding gift boxes with trembling hope. I'd come back from Clark's office with more than a legal motion. I'd come back with the spine I thought I'd lost. And yet something still tugged at me. Not anger, not doubt. Just the unfinished weight of words that had never been spoken. I pulled out a blank sheet of stationery, the thick kind Mary used to buy every year after Christmas when it went on sale. I uncapped a pen and sat down. No email, no text. This needed to be a letter. Not a rant, not a scream. Just a statement. Something that would sit in his hands like a stone. I wrote, "Christopher, your account is frozen. You lied about Sarah's mother. You used my money, $10,000 for a vacation. I trusted you. That trust is broken." I paused, the ink drying fast on the page. I could feel my pulse in my fingers. I continued. "This isn't about money. It's about what you thought of me when you lied. That I wouldn't question you. That I'd be too afraid to push back. That I'd sit in this house like a forgotten decoration while you toasted to my gullibility under a palm tree. You were wrong." I stopped again, took a sip of cold coffee, then added, "There will be no forgiveness offered today. I'm not writing this for reconciliation. I'm writing it because the next time you look at me, I want you to see the man you underestimated. The one who raised you to be better than this." I signed it simply Dad. No flourish, no warmth, just fact. I folded the letter slowly, each crease crisp and deliberate. I placed it into an envelope, wrote his name in ink that didn't shake, and sealed it shut. The act felt small, but final, like the closing of a chapter I hadn't realized had been open for far too long. I walked out to the mailbox. The snow was fresh, covering the yard like a blanket that didn't ask permission. I slid the envelope in, heard it drop with a soft, echoing thud, and stood there a moment longer than necessary. The cold didn't bother me. Not anymore. I turned back toward the house. The tree still flickered inside, casting warm light across the floor like nothing had changed. But I had. And that letter, that plain white envelope, wasn't just a message. It was a boundary. One I should have drawn years ago. The backlash didn't take long. Less than 24 hours after the account was frozen, and the letter was dropped in the mailbox, my phone began buzzing like a hornet's nest. It started with a notification: Facebook. Sarah had posted a vague status. Some people would rather tear their own family apart than let go of old grudges. We're stronger than that. I didn't need to guess who she meant. The comments poured in like a flood: friends, acquaintances, even people I hadn't spoken to in years. "You guys are amazing. Sending love to you and the kids. So sorry you're going through this during the holidays." Sympathy stacked like bricks on a wall I never saw being built. Sarah knew what she was doing. She'd always been sharp with appearances, a master of social cues, carefully staged photos, and curated heartbreak. But this wasn't just damage control. It was war. The post wasn't just a veiled jab. It was an invitation to judge, and people were accepting in droves. One comment in particular caught my eye. It was from Tom Monroe, my old bowling partner. "Did I read this right? He froze your account on Christmas." No one tagged me, of course. That would break the illusion. Better to let the audience connect the dots, whisper behind hands, nod with knowing pity. I stared at the screen, the same hand that had held Christopher's train set, now clenched into a fist. I wanted to reply, to shout the truth into the storm. But Ellen's voice came back to me, clear, calm, unshaken. "Don't play their game. Let the facts do the work." Still, the silence cut deep. Worse than the lies was how easily people believed them. I stepped away from the phone, poured myself another cup of coffee, and stared out the window. The snow had started again, soft flakes dusting the porch, covering the mailman's footprints from earlier. I couldn't shake the weight pressing down on my chest, not just from the betrayal, but from the realization that in their version of the story, I was the villain. The bitter old man, the controlling father, the cold-hearted grandfather who cut off his family at Christmas. But they didn't know about the beach photos, the money, the lie told straight to my face, the gifts that still sat under the tree like frozen memories. I sat at the kitchen table, the lights on the tree blinking in the background like a cruel metronome. My phone buzzed again. A message from Ellen. Stay the course. This will pass. The truth always breaks through. I didn't respond right away. I just stared at those words. They felt small against the tidal wave coming my way, but I held on to them, folded them up in my mind like the letter I'd sent the day before. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. The legal papers were in motion. The truth was on paper, signed and time-stamped. And while Facebook spun its version of events, I had facts. I had patience. And I had something Sarah didn't expect, a quiet fire that had no intention of dying out. The day after Sarah's Facebook post, the phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Notifications, missed calls, voicemails I had no intention of listening to. Even Tom Monroe texted, asking if we could grab coffee sometime soon, with that polite vagueness people use when they don't know what side they're on. I didn't reply. I didn't have to. The truth was already moving. Clark's office had filed the freeze paperwork. My letter had been sent. But Ellen had something else in mind. That morning, she knocked on my door, not with cookies, but with a newspaper folded under one arm and her laptop under the other. You ready for the next step? She asked, not waiting for an answer before walking in. I gestured to the kitchen table. What now? Lawsuits filed. Facebook's roasting me. What's left? Public clarity, she said, pulling up a chair and opening the laptop. They're painting you as a bitter old man, a villain in a holiday drama. You don't have to shout back. You just need to whisper in the right ear. She clicked open a blank document. We write an anonymous piece. We submit it to the Concord Chronicle. No names, just facts. A father betrayed. A generous gift turned into a beachside cocktail. A lie exposed through photos. The town wants drama, we give it to them. But on our terms. I hesitated. You think the paper will run it? They love this kind of thing. Local man swindled by his own son. Add a holiday twist and a fraud angle. It'll be on the front page by Sunday, and your name won't be in it. But everyone will know exactly who it's about. I sat quietly, my hand tracing the rim of my coffee mug. It wasn't revenge I wanted. Not really. What I wanted was to reclaim the truth. To stop feeling like a shadow version of myself in my own town. Won't this blow back on the kids? I asked softly. Emily and Max don't need to see their parents dragged through the mud. Ellen looked at me, her expression steady. This isn't mud. It's light. And you're not the one who put them in the dark. I thought of the gifts still under the tree, the doll and the train set wrapped with such care. I thought of Emily's gap-toothed grin and the sound of Max's feet pounding down my hallway. I didn't want to lose them, but I had already lost their parents. Ellen placed her hand over mine. We write it. We keep it clean. We speak plainly. Let the paper tell the story they tried to bury. I nodded, slowly, deliberately. All right, I said. Let's write it. And we did. That night, while the wind howled outside and the tree blinked in the corner, we wrote a story that wasn't just mine. It was every parent who'd been lied to, used, abandoned. We didn't need to scream. We just needed to print the truth and let it echo louder than any Facebook lie ever could. The morning the article dropped, I woke before sunrise. Not out of nerves, but from something deeper, an alertness I hadn't felt in years. The coffee pot sputtered in the kitchen while the cold outside crept along the windows. I didn't touch my phone. I didn't scroll for updates. I just waited. At 6:43 a.m., I heard it, the familiar slap of the newspaper against the front porch. I opened the door, still in slippers, and reached down with steady hands. The Concord Chronicle's headline stared back at me in bold black letters: "Son swindles father for vacation cash, community caught in quiet holiday betrayal." No names, no photos. But the details, they were mine. The $10,000. The promise of medical need. The Facebook post revealing the Hawaiian vacation. It was all there, laid out like evidence in a courtroom, each paragraph a slow, deliberate unveiling of the truth. I carried the paper to the kitchen, sat at the table, and read it 3 times. The tone wasn't vindictive. It didn't spit or shout. It told the story plainly, like someone pulling back a curtain to let in sunlight. I pictured Sarah reading it, her perfect image cracking like ice under a boot. I imagined Christopher's face as he realized the narrative was no longer his to control. And I didn't smile. I didn't need to. The victory wasn't loud. It was clean. My phone started buzzing at 7:12. First was a message from a neighbor: "Just read the Chronicle. If it's who I think it is, I'm so sorry. You didn't deserve that." Then another: "James. I had no idea. Thank you for speaking out. Took guts." Tom Monroe called around 8. His voice was cautious, a little hoarse. "James, I owe you an apology. I saw Sarah's posts and..." He trailed off. "People want to believe the easiest version of the story," I said. "I don't blame you." Still, he replied, "The article hit hard. Everyone's talking about it. People are shocked." "Good," I said, sipping my coffee. "Truth ought to be shocking once in a while." By noon, I had over a dozen texts, a few voicemails, and 2 handwritten notes slid under my door. One was from the woman down the street who hadn't spoken to me since Mary's funeral. "We believe you," she'd scribbled. "And we're rooting for you." I left the paper on the table like a trophy no one asked for. Its headline glared up at me, not as a wound, but as a declaration. I'd stopped being the man who let lies write his story. Ellen came by just before lunch. She didn't knock, just walked in holding a thermos and 2 mugs. So she said, settling into the chair across from me, "How's it feel to be the quiet talk of the town? Feels like breathing again," I said. We toasted our coffee to nothing and everything. I glanced at the folded newspaper, then back at her. "It's not over, you know." "Of course not," she said. "But now you're playing your game, not theirs." And that, for the first time in weeks, felt like peace. The phone rang just past 6 p.m. I'd been expecting it all day, like a storm you can smell before the thunder starts. When I saw Christopher's name flashing across the screen, I didn't hesitate. I answered, calm as the winter air outside. "Dad, what the hell is this?" His voice hit me like a brick wall, loud, sharp, already boiling. "You froze my account. Are you serious?" I didn't flinch. "I'm serious. You had no right, none. That money's ours. It's joint. It was joint. Now it's frozen." There was a pause, the kind that burns hotter than yelling. Then came the fury. "You've lost your mind. You're pathetic. You think this makes you look strong. You look crazy." I let the words pass like wind. "You lied to me, Christopher. $10,000. I trusted you, and you used it for piña coladas and sunsets while I sat alone carving a turkey no one touched. God," he snapped, "you're so dramatic. You always make things about you." "No," I said, my voice low and steady. "You made it about me the moment you stood in my doorway and lied through your teeth. You froze my life," he shouted. "Do you even understand what you've done?" "Yes," I said. "For the first time in years, I understand exactly what I've done." In the background, I heard waves, actual waves, and a child's laugh, muffled but unmistakable. "Max." oblivious to the fire raging on his dad's phone. Then another voice entered the call, colder than the ocean breeze. "James, give me the phone." Sarah, her tone clipped, controlled, full of venom wrapped in civility. "This little stunt of yours is hurting the kids," she said. "Emily's been crying." Max is confused. "Do you really want to be the kind of grandfather who turns a family against itself?" I took a breath. "Sarah, I am not the one who lied. I am not the one who took money under false pretenses. I am not the one who posted beach photos while pretending to grieve a dying parent." Her voice sharpened. "You think this lawsuit and newspaper garbage won't come back to you? You're destroying your relationship with your grandkids." "You already did that," I replied, "the day you used them as cover for your lies." She laughed, a bitter sound. "You've always needed control. That's your problem. Maybe this is why Mary put up with so much, because you always had to win." That one landed harder than I expected. I stared at the floor, jaw tight. "I'm done being used," I said quietly. "And I'm done pretending I don't see what you both really are." "Fine," she spat. "But don't come crying when the kids stop asking about you. Then you'll have to explain to them why their grandfather disappeared, and why the truth caught up to you." I hung up, not in anger, just finality. The beep that followed was the cleanest sound I'd heard in weeks. I set the phone on the table and stared at the fireplace. No heat, no flames, but the room felt warm with something else. Resolve. I didn't win the conversation. I didn't need to. I'd already won the silence that followed. It was nearly midnight when the phone lit up again, casting a soft glow across the dark living room. I'd been staring at the tree, watching its quiet blinking like a distant heartbeat. I almost didn't check the screen, but this time it wasn't Christopher. It was Emily. Just a text. "Grandpa, can I call you?" My hands froze above the blanket on my lap. That one line unraveled something tight in my chest. I didn't hesitate. "Of course, sweetheart." The phone rang less than a minute later. I answered on the first ring. "Hi, honey." "Hi, Grandpa." Her voice was small but clear, a little shaky, like she was trying not to cry. "I miss you." My throat tightened. "I miss you too, more than you know." There was silence for a beat. Then she asked, "Why are you fighting with Mom and Dad?" "They're so mad." I looked at Mary's photo on the mantel. Her steady smile had seen so much. I took a breath. "Emily, your parents told me your other grandma was very sick. They said they needed money to help her." "She's not sick," Emily whispered. "We're at a hotel. She's fine. She just reads books and watches TV all day." I nodded slowly. "I know, sweetheart. That's how I found out. They weren't honest with me." Another long pause. Then softly, "Why would they lie?" Her voice cracked on the last word, and it nearly broke me. I wanted to protect her from this, from the weight of grown-up mistakes. But she deserved truth, at least a version she could carry. Sometimes people make bad choices, even people we love, and when they do, it can hurt a lot. But that's not your fault. Do you hear me? None of this is your fault. "Okay," she said, her voice barely above a breath. "I heard Mom yelling about money last night. She said you froze something." "I didn't know it was yours." "It was," I said gently. "But I had to. Because I was being treated unfairly. And sometimes doing the right thing means upsetting people." "Will I still get to see you?" she asked. And that's when I had to turn away from the tree because the lights blurred through tears. "Yes, sweetheart. You call me anytime. I'm still your grandpa. That doesn't change." "I love you," she whispered. "I love you too. More than you know." We stayed quiet together for a while, the line between us gentle and warm like a blanket across the miles. Eventually, she said goodnight and hung up. I held the phone for a long moment, after still hearing her little voice in my ear. Then I set it down beside the business card from Clark and the now folded newspaper. The fire inside had quieted, not gone, just steadier. Emily's voice had been a thread, a reminder of why I'd started this fight to begin with. Not for revenge, not even for justice, but for truth. So she'd grow up knowing what it looked like when someone stood their ground, not with fists, but with dignity, and wouldn't be afraid to do the same someday. New Year's Eve came with a soft snowfall and the kind of silence that makes you feel like the world is holding its breath. The streets were mostly empty, save for a few neighbors dragging bins of decorations or lighting sparklers too early. I didn't have plans, didn't want them, but there was one thing I still needed to do. The call from Clark came just after 10 that morning. "It's done," he said. "The lawsuit is filed. Your son and daughter-in-law will be served within the next 48 hours. I exhaled slowly, as if I'd been waiting to breathe since Christmas Eve. "How strong is it?" I asked. "Very. Fraud. Misuse of funds. False representation. You gave money under specific terms. We have the receipt, the texts, and now, thanks to your charming neighbor, public evidence from Sarah's posts." "Thank you," I said, "for making it matter." "Don't thank me yet," he replied. "They'll push back. Expect noise. But I've dealt with louder." I hung up and stared out the window. The snow was light, dusting the railings like powdered sugar. The town was quiet, but I wasn't. That night I found myself back at Ellen's. Her living room was lit with soft amber from a string of fairy lights along the mantel. Her old record player hummed in the corner Nat King Cole, again Mary's favorite. She'd lit candles. The house smelled like cinnamon and something savory bubbling in the oven. "You want wine or tea?" she asked. "Both," I replied, and she laughed. We sat at her dining table, legal documents spread between us and mugs steaming in our hands. She tapped her finger against the lawsuit paperwork like it was a drumbeat. "This is going to shake them. Not just because it's public, but because it's real. You're not just angry. You're armed." I nodded, letting the words settle. "He'll say I'm destroying the family." "He already did that," she said. "You're just refusing to pretend it didn't happen." Around 11, she handed me a second envelope. "What's this?" I asked. "Your story. Cleaned up. Submitted anonymously to the Chronicle's Sunday op-ed. A follow-up to the original article. They'll run it under Letters from a Betrayed Father. They loved the first one. Said the phone hasn't stopped ringing." I held the envelope like it might break if I gripped it too tight. "You wrote this, we did. You spoke it. I shaped it." I looked at her, the woman who'd once just been the neighbor with a strong opinion about gutter leaves. Now she sat across from me like a general handing over the final piece of a battle plan. "Ellen, I don't know what I would have done without you." She smiled, soft and steady. "You don't have to know. You just had to keep standing. And you did." At midnight, fireworks cracked in the distance. I raised my glass tea this time, not wine, and toasted to the quiet fire that had carried me through. A new year had arrived, and for the first time in a long time, I was ready for it. The knock came the day after the Chronicle ran the op-ed. Sharp, heavy, no hesitation. I knew who it was before I even reached the door. I didn't rush. I let the silence stretch, let the weight of it sit just long enough for them to feel it. Then I opened the door. Christopher and Sarah stood on the porch, bundled in travel clothes, their faces pale and drawn, like the plane ride home had stripped the tan off their skin. No Emily. No Max. Just the two of them, looking older than they did in the beach photos. Sarah clutched a scarf in her hands like it was holding her together. Christopher's jaw was tight. No smugness, no bluster. Just someone who'd lost control of the narrative and knew it. "Dad," he said, voice thin. "Can we come in?" I stepped aside without a word. They entered slowly, as if the floor might give out beneath them. The living room was still set up for the holidays. I hadn't taken the tree down. The gifts were still there, untouched. I walked to the fireplace and stood with my back to the room. I didn't offer them coffee, didn't ask them to sit. The silence stretched. Then Sarah cleared her throat. "We're sorry," she said, her voice practiced brittle. "We didn't mean for it to go that far." I turned. "You didn't mean to get caught, you mean?" She flinched. "We messed up," Christopher added, eyes on the rug. "We were tired, burned out. Hawaii wasn't planned at first. But once we were there, you kept lying," I finished for him. "Every photo, every caption. You used the money I gave you for an emergency to pay for luxury. And you let your kids believe their grandfather didn't matter." Sarah stepped forward. "We'll pay it back. Every cent. We just need to know you'll drop the lawsuit. Please. This is tearing the family apart." I walked to the table, picked up the Chronicle, and laid it in front of them. The headline still fresh. Their scandal printed in ink. "You did that," I said. "With your choices. With your arrogance." Christopher looked up. His eyes, once so full of excuses, now just tired. "What do you want, Dad? You want us to beg?" "No," I said. "I want you to understand what you did, and why I won't pretend it didn't happen." I paused. "The lawsuit stands, until I decide otherwise. Not because I want your money, but because I want my self-respect. And you took that from me long before you touched my bank account." Sarah opened her mouth, but no words came. Christopher put a hand on her arm. They stood there for another beat, then turned for the door. No hug, no promise. Just footsteps fading across the porch, swallowed by snow. I closed the door behind them, slowly, deliberately. For the first time, not with grief, but with clarity. The following morning, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the letter from Clark. It was the next step in the lawsuit deposition, scheduling formal statements, the kind of paperwork that keeps wounds fresh. I held it in my hands, the pages' crisp legal language stacked like bricks. I could press forward, win, make it public, drain their savings. But as I stared at Mary's photo across the room, something shifted in me. Not weakness, not forgiveness, just fatigue. I didn't want to spend another month arguing with people who only felt sorry once the walls started closing in. I didn't need their money. I didn't need their apologies. What I needed was to stop carrying their burden like it was my duty. That afternoon, I called Clark. "I want to drop the lawsuit," I said. He paused. "Are you sure?" "Yes. But I want it clear we're not settling. I'm not accepting anything from them. I'm ending it because I'm done wasting breath. I'll file the motion," he said. "It'll reflect a voluntary dismissal with prejudice." "Good." I hung up. No ceremony, no fanfare, just closure, quiet and clean. A few hours later, Christopher called. I almost didn't answer, but something in me wanted him to hear it from my voice. "You're dropping it?" he asked, breathless, like he hadn't believed it could happen. "I am," I said. "Why? Because I'm finished giving you space in my mind." He was silent. Then came Sarah's voice in the background, whispering something I couldn't make out. "Does this mean you forgive us?" he asked. "No," I replied. "This isn't for you. I'm dropping the lawsuit for me. To move on. You don't get forgiveness just because the legal part is over. But we're trying." You should have tried before you needed saving, I said. You burned the bridge. I just chose not to throw more fuel on it. What about the kids? That's up to you, I said. But if you use them again as leverage, I won't answer another call. He didn't say goodbye. The line just went quiet. I set the phone down, felt my shoulders relax. There was no satisfaction, no triumphant music in the background. Just relief. A kind of freedom that doesn't come from revenge, but from release. I walked into the living room and finally unplugged the Christmas tree. The lights flickered out the room, falling into a softer kind of darkness, the kind I could live with. I packed away the gifts, not in bitterness, but in acceptance. They hadn't been opened. Maybe they never would be. But they had served their purpose. They had shown me who I was to them and, more importantly, who I was to myself. And that lesson, though painful, was worth more than anything they could return. The days that followed were quiet, not the comforting kind, but the hollow kind that comes after a long storm. I woke each morning to silence no new calls, no letters, no knocks at the door. The tree was down, the gifts stored away, the newspaper folded into the archive of memory. You'd think that would bring peace. But peace, it turns out, has edges. I'd won, if you could call it that. The lawsuit was gone. The truth had been told. Their lies unraveled in front of an entire town. People looked at me differently now, not with pity, but with something quieter. Respect, maybe. Or caution. I could walk into the post office or the diner and feel it like a shift in the air. They knew. And more importantly, Sarah and Christopher knew they couldn't bury what they did. But even with all that, there was no joy in it. Just space and silence. The kind you fill with thoughts you didn't expect to face. I missed Emily's voice. Missed the sound of Max's feet thudding up the porch steps. I missed family, not the fantasy of it, not the edited Christmas cards or the holiday texts, but the real thing. Messy, flawed, and still showing up. What I had now was dignity, yes, but it came with a cost. I made my bed each morning with military precision, not because I needed order, but because it reminded me I was still in control of my world, even if it was smaller now. I went to the grocery store with a list and came back with the same brand of peanut butter Mary used to buy. Little rituals, quiet anchors. One morning I opened the drawer in the hallway and found the note Emily had written me last summer. It was folded like a paper airplane, ink smudged in the corner. I love you, Grandpa. I hope we go to the zoo again. My throat tightened. I set it on the mantel beside Mary's photo. It belonged where love lived, not hidden away. That evening I took a slow walk past the park. The benches were empty. The swing set creaked in the wind, and a few kids in puffy coats were building something that didn't quite resemble a snowman. I didn't stop, just watched from a distance, hands in my pockets, heart somewhere in between what I'd let go of and what I still hoped to hold again someday. Winning wasn't about crushing them. It was about not being crushed. About drawing a line and standing behind it even when the weight of it pressed against your ribs. I came home that night to an empty house, but it didn't feel as heavy. I put on Nat King. Cole poured a cup of tea and watched the snow fall against the windows. The fire crackled low in the hearth, and for the first time in weeks I didn't flinch at the silence. I sat with it. Let it wrap around me. It didn't feel like loneliness anymore. It felt like clarity. It was a Wednesday evening when Ellen called. Her voice was casual, but I could hear something underneath it. Lasagna, fresh out of the oven. No excuses. You're coming. I started to object, to say I wasn't in the mood, but the words didn't come. Instead, I found myself grabbing my coat and heading next door. Her house was warm before I even stepped in. Not just from the heat, but from the smell of tomatoes, garlic, melted cheese, and the soft hum of Billie Holiday playing in the background. She'd lit candles, not the fancy kind, but simple ones that flickered gently along the table. "Wine?" she asked. "Tea's fine. Suit yourself," she said, pouring a glass for herself anyway. We sat down, the food already plated, and for a moment neither of us spoke. We just ate. In silence. In peace. It felt like something sacred. After the plates were cleared, I leaned back and looked around the room. Photos of her grandkids, shelves of books, a little ceramic snowman someone had made in a kindergarten class years ago. Her world. Lived in. Honest. "You've been quiet," she said finally. "I needed it," I replied. "Sometimes the loudest things are the ones you don't say." She nodded, sipping her wine. "You did something a lot of people wouldn't have had the guts to do. You didn't just stand up for yourself, you stood alone." "Didn't feel brave," I admitted. "Felt lonely." "That's because it was." "But you're still standing, James." I smiled at that. Small. Earnest. Then I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a plain envelope. Set it on the table between us. "What's this?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "Open it." She peeled the flap back, pulled out the contents, and froze. 2 plane tickets. Round trip. Hawaii. Her eyes lifted slowly to meet mine. "You're joking." "Nope. Hawaii," she said, blinking. "After all that, not for escape, for reclamation." I sat back, voice steady. They made it a lie. But I can make it something else. "I figured maybe you'd want to come with me." "James," she whispered, staring at the tickets like they might vanish. "You don't owe me anything." "It's not about owing," I said. "It's about starting again. And there's no one I'd rather start again with." Her face softened. She set the tickets down and reached across the table, her hand resting lightly on mine. "You sure you're ready for a beach and a woman who packs like she's fleeing the country?" "Absolutely," I said. "Besides, someone's got to help me learn how to relax again." We sat there for a while, the warmth of her hand grounding me in a way that felt new yet familiar. I hadn't expected companionship to come from this. But maybe that's how life works. You lose one kind of love, and years later another kind walks through the door with cinnamon cookies and legal advice. I didn't know what Hawaii would bring. But for once, it felt like something was beginning, not ending. We left for Hawaii 3 days later. The airport was chaos, people dragging overstuffed luggage, kids screaming over juice boxes, a woman in line arguing with a gate agent about seat upgrades. But somehow none of it got to me. Ellen was beside me, wheeling her bright yellow suitcase like she'd done this 100 times before. "You ready for sunshine and overpriced drinks?" she asked. "Only if you're paying," I muttered, and she elbowed me lightly in the ribs. The flight was long, but the view when we landed made every second worth it. The island greeted us with warm air and that slow rhythm of life that doesn't care about calendars or grudges. The hotel overlooked the ocean, and the breeze carried the scent of salt and plumeria. We walked the beach that first evening barefoot in the sand, our feet sinking just enough to remind us we were somewhere new. Somewhere clean. I stood at the edge of the water. Ellen a few steps ahead, her hair catching the wind like something out of a dream. I slipped off my backpack to pull out my sunglasses, and that's when I saw it. A folded piece of paper, tucked between the pages of my travel guide. I knew that handwriting immediately. Emily. I unfolded the note slowly, the edges soft from being handled more than once. Her words were written in blue marker, careful and rounded. "I'm proud of you, Grandpa. I know Mom and Dad are mad, but I know you told the truth. I love you so much. Please don't be sad. Love, Emily." I stood still, the ocean lapping at my ankles, the weight of her words anchoring me deeper than any court ruling ever could. Ellen walked back and noticed the note in my hands. From her, I nodded, throat too tight to speak. "That girl's got your backbone," she said gently. I looked out across the water, the horizon wide and unbroken. For the first time since Christmas, I didn't feel the pull of what I'd lost. I felt the strength of what I still had. That note didn't erase what happened. It didn't magically undo betrayal. But it gave meaning to every hard choice, every lonely night, every line I'd drawn to protect my name and my worth. I folded it carefully and tucked it into my wallet right behind the bank receipt that had started it all. One told the story of how they tried to take everything from me. The other reminded me why they failed. That night, Ellen and I had dinner by torchlight toes in the sand, a lazy guitar playing somewhere nearby. She raised her glass and said, "To truth, to peace, and to whatever comes next." I lifted mine, the candlelight flickering in the rim, to not backing down. We clinked our glasses and sat there quietly, the kind of silence that says everything. I didn't know what I'd return home to, but I knew who I was now. And finally, that was enough. Sometimes the deepest betrayals don't come from strangers. They come from the people you raised, the people who once held your hand and called you dad. But standing up for yourself, even when it means standing alone, is a quiet form of love. Not just for you, but for the people watching like Emily. If you're a parent who's been taken for granted, I hope you remember this. Protecting your dignity doesn't make you cruel. It makes you whole. Have you ever been in a situation like mine? How did you handle it? What did it teach you? Tell me in the comments. And if this story meant something to you, please like, subscribe, and share. Thank you for listening.